Yo, so Islam Makhachev's road in the welterweight division has been a very controversial topic that has been talked about, especially after he won the double champ status. So basically, he has a lot of options in the welterweight division and out of the elite welterweight division, right? We're going to be discussing five in the welterweight and one very controversial one in the lightweight division that could be very possible, not in the lightweight, but in the welterweight division. So, we actually have five options. We have the first one is Kamaru Usman, right? Kamaru Usman is not really that much of a possible fight. Let's just be honest. But the only reason I'd say is simply because Kamaru Usman has a manager, so-called Ali Abdelaziz, just like Islam Makhachev. That's the only reason why this fight could happen. Kamaru Usman is not in his prime anymore, not as powerful as he used to be. His knees, injuries, all these stuff, he's just not going to be able to match the prime Islam Makhachev. Let's just be honest. And Islam Makhachev is going to demolish the shit out of him, in my opinion. So Kamaru Usman is not going to have any chance, in my opinion, against Islam Makhachev. Islam Makhachev is just going to beat him on the wrestling, on the striking, on every single thing, right? Kamaru Usman is so old right now, out of his prime, not as good as he used to be, and basically Kamaru Usman, he's washed out, in my opinion. He's not really that bad. He could beat some contenders, but he could never win the title ever again, in my opinion. So this fight could be very potential, very possible, since both have same managers, but you know, I would say the possibility of this fight is like 80%. Yeah, 18%. Next, we have Shavkat Rakhmonov, right? A very huge welterweight, a 6'2" welterweight with 77 inches reach. A very huge welterweight, actually, with very good wrestling. And maybe in another universe, in another time, Shavkat Rakhmonov would be the one with a fight to happen, but unfortunately, he hasn't fought in a year. The last time he fought was in the last December last year, which is a lot of time, honestly. It's more than a year, basically, and he's inactive, and this makes him very, very poor in terms of having a chance to fight Islam Makhachev. I mean, if you really want to have a title shot, you got to be active. And unfortunately, Shavkat Rakhmonov is not that active at all. So Shavkat Rakhmonov doesn't really have that much of a chance, right? And if he wants to, he should have fought at least once in June or July or something like that. But injuries and inconsistency and stuff like that, it's really made him a lot of obstacles in the way up to the fight. And I think that he has a very poor chance right now. I think he has probably 7%, stuff like that. Third, we have Michael Morales. Michael Morales, 6 foot with 79 inches reach. He has a reach of a light heavyweight, really. He's so big, so powerful, so dominant. But I just don't see the fight with Islam Makhachev going the same way as it went with Sean Brady. I mean, let's just be honest. Michael Morales is a very huge, talented, powerful welterweight fighter, but he's never ever going to be able to dominate Islam Makhachev, especially if Islam Makhachev uses his wrestling wisely. That's impossible for Michael Morales. It's an impossible mission for any welterweight fighter to really do something with Islam Makhachev's wrestling. It's so hard. The guy has been wrestling since he was a kid, Islam Makhachev. So basically, a fight with Islam Makhachev, if Islam Makhachev stays on the feet, that's going to be a very risky position. But let's just be honest, Michael Morales is not that fighter you want to stand up with, right? You got to go and have a lot of takedowns and attempt a lot of takedowns and only go with the wrestling. That's the only way of Islam Makhachev to win versus Michael Morales. Any shot from Michael Morales could be the end of the fight, even if it's Islam Makhachev, because Michael Morales is a huge motherfucker. That's it. So with a huge motherfucker like that, you gotta be cautious. You gotta be so cautious, right? The last fight, actually, that is not really that much possible, is Carlos Prates, right? Carlos Prates won a very good KO versus Leon Edwards, and basically he dominated that fight. Leon Edwards just tried to do something, but he was not able to do nothing. And Leon is the former champion. So for Carlos to win versus a former champion, this is a very good status to have. But what really makes him so bad and having a chance is that Ian Gary actually won over him recently. Ian Gary beat him. So he doesn't really have that much of a chance, actually. He probably has 10%. Why? Because Ian Gary beat him, as I said. And Yangari actually is the one with the most potential to fight Islam Makhachev right now. Yangari beat the former welterweight champion Bilal Muhammad, and I think that he's the one with probably the most potential to fight Islam Makhachev. The guy is actually a very huge welterweight in terms of length. He's so lanky. He's 6'3" with 74.5 inches reach. Not really that much for his height, but he's so tall, so tall. Maybe skinny, but really tall. Is Islam Makhachev going to be able to beat him? Well, although he beats Bilal, but he beat Bilal because of the mentality of Bilal. Bilal lost versus JDM because he didn't really put that much wrestling volume as needed. Same thing with the Angari. With the Angari, he should have put more wrestling volume, and guess what? It ended same like it ended with JDM. It ended the same way, the exact same way. A decision and a loss. That's what it ended like, right? Why? Because Bilal doesn't want to go and have that much wrestling. Right? He wants to prove he's got this Canelo striking. He doesn't really need to prove anything anymore, especially since he's the champion. You're the champion. Why would you go and have some striking and prove you have Canelo striking? You don't need to do that shit, right? You're a former champion. Go put your very best. You don't have to prove anything to anybody, right? And for me, he lost both of these fights with Ian Gary and GDM, both of them for the same exact reason. And when we look at Islam in comparison, Islam Makhachev, once he went versus GDM, he actually put on the needed wrestling. I wouldn't say Bilal could have done the same like Islam did versus JDM, but he could have done way better than he actually did. He could have done way more, but he just didn't. So this really makes it so bad for such a very good former champion like Bilal. And he has the potential. Here's the thing. He has the potential, but he just doesn't want it. He doesn't want it. That's for Ian Gary. The most potential fight, in my opinion. The possibility of this fight, I'd say, is 22%, which is too high, by the way. The last fight, which is so good to happen, and I hope it could happen, and it's probably the best fight to ever make in the history of MMA, in the history of UFC, Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria. Is there a better fight to make at the whole UFC roster than this one? This is the best one to ever be made, and it needs to be made. Arman Tsarukyan is now, I would say, grounded. He's still grounded by Dana White, and it's just going to be only with Islam Makhachev. So it's very possible for him to fight Islam Makhachev, especially that, Islam Makhachev said himself in the post-fight interview in the Octagon that he wants the White House. So this would be a very interesting matchup, and he also called Trump the best skill-wise ever fight, even more than Khabib and Conor in terms of skill-wise, I'm saying, not in terms of controversies, but in terms of skill-wise. This is the best fight ever to be made in the history of the MMA, and I hope it could happen. And I hope we can hear that this fight will happen any soon. Thank you guys so much. See ya.